Welcome to CSI Iowa. I'm your host, Bob Montserrat. Sure glad you're here. Matt Montserrat's in the production room. Tonight, we have a special guest, and my guest is Gary Pulsipher, and he is the president and CEO at St. John's Regional Medical Center. And you may be wondering, well, what is that about? What does the president and CEO of St. John's Regional Medical Center have to do with CSI Iowa? Well, as you know, CSI Iowa, not only do I deal with forensic situations, I also deal with people that have gone through trauma. I deal with people that have been through disasters. And this particular hospital, St. John's Regional Medical Center, is in Joplin, Missouri. And everyone definitely has to know about Joplin, Missouri, and the F5 tornado that went through there last year. So welcome to the show, Gary. Glad you're here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Now, I had the opportunity and pleasure to meet you at a disaster conference here in Des Moines and heard the story and the situation that you went through in Joplin with that tornado. And I was just like, whoa, this is something that needs to be shared. So more people need to hear about what exactly happened down there. Now, and I should say that that's something that most people try to prepare for, but never expect it's going to happen to them. And in your case, it happened. And what I remember from what you were saying, you were home and you didn't even realize what had happened. Is that correct?
That's correct. We live about 8 blocks north of some of the destruction zone. And it was just one of those wild spring storms. We were watching the hailstones hit this little lake behind our house. So yeah, it was just one of those unusual nights. We heard the sirens, we heard the warnings, but so many times we just take those with kind of a grain of salt and don't pay a lot of attention. That's what we were doing that evening.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, you called me earlier today to tell me that there may be a problem with you getting on the show because of another tornado warning or watch, one or the other.
Yeah, actually, they called a warning just because of some high winds, but there weren't any tornadoes cited. So maybe they're just getting a little more concerned about that stuff.
Yeah, well, I would say so. Now, tell me, what was the date that this disaster took place and the time?
It was Sunday, May 22nd. The actual tornado hit at 5:41 p.m. It was fortunate for us there at the hospital because most of our business, we have a tremendous amount of outpatient business that happens during the week. So it was fortunate for us that it was a Sunday afternoon. We were as low on numbers of staff as we ever are, and the number of visitors and others to the hospital were fairly low. So in that sense, it was a good time for it.
Right. Now, did you know that these storms were coming through? I mean, were you expecting this foul weather to be there?
We were, yeah. We had some notifications earlier that afternoon, about 2 p.m., I believe, is when they started to come in, that there was the potential for storms. And then as we were watching it, as it was getting closer, all of the indications that day were that it would be north of town. And that's where the line of storms was sort of congregating. So we all relaxed a little bit. We're still on edge, but we relaxed a little bit. But as this developed, there were actually a couple of storms that came together that then took this new path and very, very quickly took a path that no one had expected that day.
Yeah. As your position in the hospital, being president or CEO, are you responsible for, setting up plans and how to deal with this type of situation?
I guess at the end of the day, that's true. Now, we have certainly specialists that do the bulk of that work and make sure that we're prepared in every way. But yeah, we all become very conversant with those plans in the hospital. We drill them all the time. We're constantly working on how we can best get patients to safety. So it's really something that becomes the life of all of us, especially here in the Midwest, kind of like you guys are up in Iowa. Same thing.
Yeah, and I tell you, the world was really on Joplin because that was something that nobody would expect. Everybody, I think, feels safe in a city. You figure that it's a large city and there's nothing, we don't hear about tornadoes hitting cities, but really last year a lot of cities were getting hit.
They were. That's true. You guys had one this last spring, I think, up in Iowa, not in Des Moines, but in Iowa, that caused some serious damage to one of your hospitals and one of the communities there. Strange creatures, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. So on that day, back in May of last year, you knew the storm was coming. You said you were watching the hail coming down. But then after the huge destruction, how did you know that this destruction took place?
Well, the strange thing for us, and we have an administrative call schedule, so someone is always on call and the first one alerted. But that night, things developed and happened so quickly with that storm that the normal call trees didn't take place. And then our hospital was right at the beginning of the EF5, where it got very severe. So it knocked out communications immediately. So we didn't get the normal calls we get from the hospital warning us. In fact, today, for example, during this storm warning system, I got calls at my office phone, I get calls on my cell phone, I get emails. There are just a number of notifications. Well, none of that was able to take place that night at the hospital because of how quickly that storm hit. So my actual first call that night was from our sister hospital about an hour and a half away in Springfield, Missouri.
Really? So they called you and said that a tornado hit your hospital?
Yeah, basically, Gary, we've gotten some indications that a tornado has either hit the hospital or is very close to the hospital. Wanted to make you aware, and so you immediately jump in the car and go see what you can do. That's kind of how all of us react. You just your plan is to just get there as quickly as you can, get dressed appropriately, and take off.
So for you, appropriately is suit and tie or no?
No, not on those days. It's a good pair of hiking shoes, and some Levi's, because you assume that you're going to have, really the assumption was, Bob, that we were going to go into something, and I assumed I'd get there. There might be a little bit of damage, but it wouldn't be nearly what you think it would be. Those are kind of how you diminish some of those concerns.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got about 8 blocks and got into the serious destruction zone and literally couldn't drive down many of the streets, then you just start to panic and you begin to think, oh goodness, now what are we going to do to, but then I was still 15 minutes from the hospital. So still wondering, did it hit the hospital like it did here? Because I literally was in a place within the 8 blocks. I get to a spot where there were numerous apartments and those buildings were gone when I was driving through there, driving over lumber, driving over power lines. It was a crazy evening.
As a matter of fact, was it possible for you to actually get lost because you didn't recognize the streets or where you were?
There was it didn't bother me that evening too badly. I knew that route pretty well, so it didn't worry me too much. But it was very strange. It was surreal to just, all of the landmarks were virtually gone. Almost all of the trees had been stripped. So it was a strange night. And also, I was very early, and it was fortunate that I was early, but traffic was still crawling and just barely moving. So you had a chance to kind of get your bearings.
So you were actually able to drive then to the hospital?
I was. It took me only 20 minutes or so. So, I took the very good routes, but you'd be looking ahead and you could see that everything was blocked. So you'd just take a detour and literally try to find streets that were open and that you could get down. And I was lucky, and it truly was lucky that I was early, because the town just filled up with people coming in to try to find family members and to try to get to their homes, and so it became impassable very quickly.
So as you were getting closer and closer to the hospital, I'm just curious as to what was going through your mind.
Well, the biggest fear, the biggest worry was, the coworkers and the patients. You just have this image in your mind that, oh my goodness, and what am I going to find? How are we going to get started on putting things back together? One of the last places I passed, I really took a kind of a backward route, but last places I passed was a nursing home that wasn't far from our hospital, and it was just totally destroyed. And so it's just that, there's that adrenaline, trying to get there as quickly as you can and get going, but then also that just sincere fear that what you'll find when you get there.
Yeah. And so when you got there, what was the first thing that you saw when you got there?
Well, I pulled up on the top of the hill. We called it Lot K. It was sort of, the farthest parking lot from the hospital, and a lot of us would park there to save the good parking for patients. So I got up to Lot K, which kind of looks down on the hospital. And the first thing you see, the structure is standing mostly. You know, the twin towers where our patients were standing, so that was good. But you could see that virtually every window had been blown out. And so there were curtains flailing in the breeze. There were a couple of mattresses hanging outside of those curtains or outside of those windows. And so, you know, but the thing we do when we try to prepare for condition gray is what we call it, is we very quickly get our patients, when we can, into the center hallways and away from the windows and away from those patient room areas that could be impacted. So you just find yourself thinking, boy, I hope they got them into the middle hallways, because this thing does not look good. It looked like a bomb went off on every floor. That was the strange thing. It just literally took virtually every window out.
Now, I know that your helicopter was destroyed also, and we had some photos up of the helicopter. And that's something that you made a decision, whether there was a decision made, I'm not saying you, but a decision was made to stay put because you thought it was going to go north of the hospital or away from it, correct?
That's exactly right. Our airport in Joplin is north of town, and that's where we normally go and tie those things down when we have some severe storm warnings. But as I mentioned, all the indications were that the big storm was north, so we kept it right there on the pad, and it didn't work out very well.
No, right. It was totally, from the photos, it looks like it's totally destroyed.
Just twisted, and you know, we had some surveillance video from the inside the hospital to see some of the rooms that were destroyed there. I would love to have been able to see some of those parking lot pictures. The destruction of the cars and the way it just threw cars around and that helicopter around. The force and the power of that thing is just amazing.
Now, you know, I know there were a number of people that lost their lives, and I can't remember what the number, but it was somewhere less than 200, I think. Is that correct?
Total, yes. I believe the total was 162 when it was all said and done.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that you were probably experienced some of the, or saw some of the people that were injured or killed.
Just a couple. You know, and it's one of the things that bothers me to this day, Bob, is I drove past so many places where I could have stopped and helped, but again, my job was to get to the hospital, and that's what I did. So, and we only lost 5 at the hospital. We had 5 patients and 1 visitor. One visitor was in the lobby, and something happened that took her life. And the 5 patients that we lost were all in our intensive care unit, all on mechanical respirators and other equipment that were immediately rendered useless because the generators went out and all the power went out. And our staff just couldn't stay with them long enough to keep them bagged and to keep them going. Plus, it was a fairly heavily damaged part of the hospital. The storm sort of came in from the west and left to the east, and the greater destruction in that hospital was as the storm was passing through, what it was pulling through, and all of the debris that was flying. Was pretty intense.
Well, we need to take a break, and I want to get back and talk more about what you had experienced. So we'll be back. You've been watching CSI Iowa on webcast1live.com, and we'll be back after these messages.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
At the BrownellsPoliceStore.com, we specialize in a full line of duty gear for military, law enforcement, and security professionals. PoliceStore.com has a great selection of high-quality and dependable police supplies, all backed by Brownell's 100% unconditional lifetime guarantee. The Brownells Training Group offers firearms training for military, police, professional security, and qualified citizens taught by professionals who are recognized for their knowledge and real experience. Check us out today at PoliceStore.com/CSI.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, listen, watch, chat. This is Webcast One Live. Programs on webcast1live.com are brought to you in part by KDC Builders, building custom homes for how you live. KDC will take your dreams and turn them into reality. Go to our website, kdcbuilt.com, or call Hannah Inman at 515-975-9990. And Tom Coates and ConsumerCreditOfAmerica.com. Are you overwhelmed with mounted credit card debt and feel there's no way out? Well, there is. Call 1-800-955-5765 for Consumer Credit of America. That's ccofamerica.com.
Welcome back to CSI Iowa, and my guest tonight is Gary Pulsipher, and he is President and CEO of St. John's Regional Medical Center in Joplin, Missouri. And we've been talking about the situation there that happened back in May, and pretty devastating. And Gary, are you there? Are you hearing us?
Yes. Yes. Can you still see me?
Yes, I can see you. I'm just not hearing myself very good. So,
okay.
But you were talking about the fact that before we went to break, power went out. When that tornado hit, not only did it take out the normal supply, but it also took out your generators, correct?
It did. That's right. The placement of the generators were right by our emergency room, but actually about a floor up. So they were on sort of the platform about a floor above the ground, and they were just taken immediately.
Yeah, and so therefore you had people that were on life support, basically, that those machines shut down. That's
right, they did. The machine shut down immediately, and the we don't know if it was the trauma from all of the flying debris or not. It's tough to tell, but those were certainly our most frail patients as well.
Yeah, and if you have flying debris, then you have probably a lot of glass and sharp objects that are flying around in there.
That's true. Some of the pictures were amazing, Bob. Those big, heavy, full core doors that we have in hospitals. Some of those were ripped off and thrown into other rooms. So that's what's one of the biggest dangers in a building like that. When windows break and that air can circulate and move around. For example, it filled up the elevator shafts. It was a 9-story building, filled up the elevator shafts with furniture. Just the way the wind gets through those buildings is amazing. Very devastating.
Oh, yeah. Now, you had some videos that were, or surveillance videos within the hospital that showed some of this taking place?
We did. In fact, I believe it's even been posted on YouTube now. But it was one of our emergency room waiting areas, and we made sure there weren't any people there even close. But it's fascinating. You can see a magazine kind of start to wave in the breeze. And then as things develop, you actually see the spinning and just see the furniture just swept away immediately.
Now, obviously, during this time, when this happened, and your hospital basically is shut down, what did you do with the patients?
Well, we had 183 patients in the hospital that night. There was one surgery going on, and some babies being delivered. So literally, once you kind of once our staff, and what our staff did was they all took cover. And thank goodness we didn't lose a single staff member, which is kind of amazing. So they come out and they basically assess the situation. And then the first thing they do is get busy moving those patients out of the hospital. Because, and it was interesting in talking with many of them. For example, the emergency room called up to the operating room and said, we're destroyed. You guys are probably okay. Let us bring our patients up to you. Nobody realized the severity of the destruction to the entire area. But really, our staff, and when I got there, the first, you run in the hospital. Our emergency commander was actually on site already, which I was impressed with. So I ran in the hospital to see if I could help. And those staff members were very methodically, very in a very composed way, just working to get the most severe patients out first, kind of triaging as you do, to make sure people got moved where they needed to get moved quickly.
So you were actually transporting them to another hospital in town?
We were. It was a fascinating thing. We had a couple of exits to the hospital that we could get to. It's hard to describe the amount of debris that was in the hospital that we were fighting just to, in some cases, to get patients through the halls. And so we were using the stairwells, and there, it was like, you guys know in Iowa what it's like when you have a bad snowstorm and somebody just shovels sort of one trail through the snow instead of shoveling the entire walk or the entire driveway. Well, that's what it was like in those stairwells. There was literally just one place to walk down through. So one of the great things is many people showed up. The woman, I helped only one woman come down because we had so many helpers. But we had a big National Guard guy on the front of this woman going down the stairs. So it was very treacherous, but in a very methodical way, we were just taking these patients down on kind of whatever we could find. We had a number of these med sleds, which are perfect for that. Got handles on the sides. They're very lightweight. But in some cases, we took people down in wheelchairs, and in other cases, we threw them on a mattress to take them down the stairs. And so that was the process, was just getting people out. And as we came out of the side of the hospital, there were other people, other volunteers from the community that knew we would need help. So they would pull up in SUVs and in trucks. And we literally, in some cases, put people in the back of the truck to go probably just the 6 blocks across the street to Freeman Hospital, which was totally fine. It didn't have any destruction at all.
So were you doing things according to plan, or were you ad-libbing?
Well, no, this was much worse than planned. The one thing we found with all of our plans is we never planned for something this destructive, and had never really planned for the kind of evacuation that we would need in a case like this. But it was amazing how well people responded and how well things came together so that we could get people triaged. The less critical patients, we had there were 2 major medical office buildings and plus another rehab hospital on our campus. Those that were not as critically injured, we triaged very quickly down to the rehab hospital. It was severely damaged as well, but it was much safer than the other buildings. And so that's where we took those that sort of were the walking wounded, or the people that weren't as critically injured or critically ill patients, if you will. And from there, we had a number of our medical staff show up, and we triaged those patients. One of the school buses from the local school showed up. I don't know if somebody called them or if they just had the wherewithal to know that we would need some help. So we took those people to other hospitals in the region on things like school buses. So it was an amazing process. Our own plan, our emergency plan at the hospital, worked in the sense that our people were very well drilled and knew what they needed to do to take care of patients. It was fascinating to watch all the other pieces of plans from the community come into play to help us that night.
It's probably something where you say, I think we're going to update our emergency plan because we learned so many things after this, and I'm sure, and I know that you've been asked to talk about all of these things and how you worked it out without, a specific plan.
We have. In fact, we've done a lot of work through Missouri Hospital Association, for example, and through some other organizations to take a deep dive into our plan to find out where we could have done better and where we might have been able to respond better. It's been a very good process as we've walked through all of the things that we could have done. Our biggest challenge, Bob, that day was communications. We'd always planned to use at least our radios or our cell phones or even the in-house phones, but all of those capabilities were gone that evening. There wasn't a cell tower in sight. There wasn't all of those radios that we purchased and think work so well were gone. Our emergency trailer, which we keep so that we could hook up a satellite, that ended up more than 3 blocks away from the hospital, totally destroyed. So communication was a huge challenge and a huge problem that night. That was probably the biggest challenge we had to our plan. Our plan always assumed that we'd have some way to communicate.
Well, I was also thinking, too, that, when you have a big storm like that, it's dark. And so people are moving around in a hospital down corridors when it's dark. How'd you overcome that?
It was amazingly dark inside. Now, at 6 to 7 p.m. at night, there was still some light in late May outside, but you're right, the interior corridors were totally black. All those cool emergency lights that we put up in the hospital had been blown away. So none of that worked, of course. So There were cell phones. It was amazing how much you can see with one of the cell phone lights. And that's the kind of, plus we were able to get to a number of our flashlights. So virtually all of us had flashlights and were able to guide people down where it was so dark to see, because the best stairwells to use were the ones that were in the darkest part of the hospital, of course.
Oh, absolutely, because they would be enclosed and very dark. Yeah. So now you issue flashlights to people, I'm assuming. Everybody carries them in their pockets.
We did. In fact, that was a big part of some of the stuff that I was doing, for example, was just making sure people had some basic supplies to do the things that they needed to do.
The other aspect is you have your staff that's been traumatized during all of this, and maybe even injured.
Yeah, we had a few injuries, nothing terribly severe, but they were all just working away. And maybe that just characterizes healthcare workers who are kind of used to putting aside their personal issues. But that's what I found that night, is very few of them. In fact, one of the nurses, I was up on one of the floors, and one of the nurses, after we'd moved a patient, showed me her leg that was just bleeding like crazy. But she said, Gary, it's not a big deal. It's a flesh wound. It's not hit any arteries or anything. I'll be fine. And
wow.
It was amazing. There were some of the amazing stories that night also with our emergency room. Right next to the front door of our emergency room was a fairly major gas main. And that had broken. And so the smell of natural gas was very, very heavy around the emergency room entrance. Now, a number of people just instinctively, in fact, we had some terrible injuries show up right at the emergency room, right as we're just totally debilitated. But those ER staff members, what they do is they, of course, didn't turn those injured away. They just did the best they could to try to find some supplies to take care of them. There's an amazing story about a mom who brought a young boy over with some severe cuts to hit the back of his neck. In fact, the doctor could see his spine, his spinal cord through that. And young man did fine and recovered. But those were the kind of things that were showing up. But the thing that amazed me that night is those ER members would get people out of the hospital and get them on their way. And then they'd go right back through the natural gas smell, knowing that their life could be in danger. But they'd go right back in and evacuate other people. It was actually a blessing that all of the electrical was immediately dead. Otherwise, I'm not sure what would have happened if something would have sparked.
Right, and nothing did that. No explosion took place, correct?
Correct. We didn't have any of those damages, thank goodness.
Wow. And there's so many things that could set that off, and a spark.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Of course, you also were probably overwhelming the other hospital.
Oh, very quickly. In fact, it's kind of a great story. We have gone to a number of these communication opportunities with Freeman, because ours is a story of total destruction. Theirs was a story of being totally overwhelmed with patients. The number of life-saving surgeries that were done in those first few hours, I believe, it was over 20 life-saving surgeries, and they had blood all over their floors, not just in their emergency room, but in their entire hospital. They were sending some of their best volunteers out, just mopping some of that stuff up. So it was a totally different scenario at each place, and from their side too, something that they'd never planned for either. One of their biggest challenges that night was the water pressure in the city, because of the water main breaks. Caused some serious issues for them, because they didn't have the water pressure to run the sterilizers to clean the equipment and get ready for the very next surgeries. So,
and those water main breaks, I'm assuming, were from all the plumbing and all of the homes and businesses that were broken.
That's right. Yeah, throughout town, the water mains were broken badly enough that they couldn't get the water pressure they needed. Mm. In fact, some of the first calls that we got from them were, "Can you get to any supplies, any medications? Can you get us antibiotics? Can you get us tetanus? Some of the most basic things you need to treat some of those injuries." So there were a number of people that had just been pummeled by the debris that was flying around, and there were quite a few that got a kind of a strange fungal infection in the days and weeks that followed the storm. So some of those really basic things were the most difficult things to get and to round up. We literally took people we have these, they call them Omnicell medication cabinets in the hospital. And we got into all of those. You kind of have to break into them when the power's down. So our nurses in some cases actually kind of had fun taking an axe to the Omnicell that they've been fighting with for the last 5 years. So it's an interesting process.
Yeah, it is, especially when you're keeping track of all the medications that go out of that cabinet. Then when you're using an axe, that kind of overthrows that system.
That's right. 1 minute you're mindful of every little thing you're using, and then the next minute you're just trying to get the supplies to the people that need them.
Survival mode.
Yeah, survival mode.
Yeah. Well, we need to take another break. We've been talking to Gary Pulsipher, who is the president and CEO of St. John's Regional Hospital in Joplin, Missouri, and we've been talking about the Joplin F5 tornado. We have more of the show to come, and we'll be back after these messages.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
At the BrownellsPoliceStore.com, we specialize in a full line of duty gear for military, law enforcement, and security professionals. PoliceStore.com has a great selection of high-quality and dependable police supplies, all backed by Brownell's 100% unconditional lifetime guarantee. The Brownells Training Group offers firearms training for military, police, professional security, and qualified citizens taught by professionals who are recognized for their knowledge and real experience. Check us out today at PoliceStore.com/CSI.
Whether you're 10, 25, 50, 80 years old and beyond, everyone needs to live within their means. I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of America. For almost a quarter of a century, we've helped people of all ages learn to manage their personal finances to benefit them far into the future. When problems arise, we've got the experience you need to make those debt problems go away. Got financial problems? Call Consumer Credit of America.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, listen, watch, chat. This is Webcast One Live. Programs on webcastonelive.com are brought to you in part by KDC Builders, building custom homes for how you live. KDC will take your dreams and turn them into reality. Go to our website, kdcbuilt.com, or call Hannah Inman at 515-975-9990. And Tom Coates and ConsumerCreditOfAmerica.com. Are you overwhelmed with mounted credit card debt and feel there's no way out? Well, there is. Call 1-800-955-5765 for Consumer Credit of America. That's ccofamerica.com.
Welcome back to CSI Iowa. I just want to remind everyone that the shows that we have on live now will be archived on my CSI Iowa Facebook page. So in the search bar, just type in CSI Iowa and you can see the archived shows. So go back and watch it and share it if you'd like. That'd be great. We've been talking to Gary Pulsipher, who is the president and CEO of St. John's Regional Medical Center in Joplin, Missouri, and we've been talking about the F5 tornado that went through there last May. And wow, it's to hear about everything that happened is kind of like a wow factor, and you're thrown into a situation, and even though you have the best plans available, you really don't know what to expect, and that is what we've been talking about tonight. So, you're talking about the power being out, the watching videos of things moving and being destroyed and thrown out, and you had to, Gary, during this time, you were probably on autopilot. There were things that had to be done. You knew that things had to be done, and you were just doing them and not thinking about probably all of the stuff that has taken place or who was injured, who was alive or dead or whatever. And I'm assuming that you were just focused on what had to be done in the immediate time surrounding, trying to save people.
That's really true. In fact, we, in those disasters, we focus around our incident command. And so we touch base with Dennis Manley's the guy that does it for us and does an incredible job. But so you'd go touch base with Dennis and find out what needed to happen. And but you're right, it was just simply, deploy and try to help as many as you can.
Yeah, and I'm assuming time was just kind of either standing still or flying by. I don't know which one it was for you, but this had to be time consuming. I mean, it took time to move people and get help to your hospital and try to save lives at the same time. I'm assuming that you probably weren't even looking at a watch or a clock.
No, we really weren't. It did go very quickly. It was, it was a bizarre evening, but, so the first efforts were to get the most critically injured out. And as that was happening, then we'd move the other patients out. One of the big challenges that night with the lack of communications is we'd send somebody up to see if the 7th floor had been cleared, and they'd never come back because they'd get busy helping someone.
Oh, because of people being injured.
Yeah, and so or they just need to dive in and help somebody. So that was a challenge that night. We very quickly, however, got help from fire departments, and we pretty quickly turned some of that kind of duty, seeing if floors had been cleared, to those folks who were very, very good at it. And plus we didn't have, we just had patient care staff that were working that night. And not everybody was as lucky as I was and weren't able to get into the hospital. So we had sort of a skeleton crew from hospital people. And amazing, so many of us like to live close to the hospital because it's so easy to get there, that some of those folks weren't even aware of what their family situation was, if their families were safe, but they came in and they worked until we didn't need them any longer.
When you look at the photos, the aerial photos, you see the hospital just is like a tower amongst nothing but rubble. And,
that's true.
Yeah, and it looks like, when they constructed that hospital, it seems like they did a good job. I mean, it didn't blow away, even though there was damage inside. So somebody did something right in that situation.
It's true. Very, very sturdy building. In fact, last night, the final piece of the final tower came down. So we're just in the process of clearing the site now.
So what were you doing in the meantime once you still had a hospital, correct?
Well, what we did is, because it was totally destroyed that night, what we did that first week, which just all crazy ran together, is we very quickly realized that, this town, Joplin, is a town of about 50,000 people, 2 big hospitals, relatively large hospitals. Ours was 367 beds, and I think Freeman is closer to 400 beds, a little bit larger. And you think, do you really need 2 big hospitals? But we serve a region of about 700,000 people. And we realized very quickly that we needed to try to restore services as fast as we could. So that night, we actually worked with even the Lowe's department. The Lowe's store, for example, opened up their store and said, hey, if you want to turn this into a mini emergency room triage area. So we did that. We went to one of the Catholic high schools and did the same. We went up to what we call Memorial Hall here in town. It's in the midtown, and it was not in the destruction zone, and turned that sort of event center into our next emergency room clinic / for the next few days. And then we also got busy figuring out how can we get some inpatient capacity back up and running. So that's what we were busy doing those first few days.
Yeah, because there would be people that would be out of work because the building that they worked in was destroyed. So how did you deal with that situation?
Very true. In fact, that night, as soon as we got things tied up there at the hospital and all our patients and coworkers that we knew of taken care of, it was about 9 or 10 at night. We'd had requests from the city for me to show up at the city's incident command. And so I hustled up there and stayed there until about 3 a.m. the next morning, and then came home and got a shower, and then turned around and went back. But my wife said to me, Gary, you're a hospital administrator. When the hospital's gone, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
So, well, I don't know. We'll figure that out. But literally, we're part of the Mercy Health System in St. Louis, Missouri. Wonderful system. And our CEO came down literally the next morning and said, 1, we're going to rebuild, but 2, we're also going to keep everybody on payroll until that new hospital is built. So we don't want our coworkers to worry about that. So that was a tremendous relief. All of our coworkers, many of them, with severe destruction in their own lives. Thank goodness we didn't lose any, but, they had homes lost, some lost family members and cars and all of that challenge you go through. Mm-hmm. So they suddenly relaxed, and we set up our incident command at a convention center and took that over until the end of August. And so we just had people, all of our coworkers, flowing into there for days. We had food and clothes delivered there that people could come and get. It was an amazing scene, and that's kind of typifies the scene all around Joplin. The entire city became flooded with incredible volunteers. And it was just a process of putting things back together one by one.
So the people were still on the payroll, your staff, and they were still working, but in a different capacity or a different area. Is that the way
That's
I'm
true.
assuming? Okay.
Those that could work, some had suffered some challenges. But we kept paying them, and then we fairly quickly turned into a staffing service in a number of ways because our capacity was so much less than it was, and we had 1,800 people that worked at the hospital and another 400 that worked in our physician clinics. And we got the physician clinics up and running very quickly, but we had a tent hospital after 7 days, but it just had 46 beds compared to 367 before. Wow. So those people that we didn't need to work there, we started deploying out to the other hospitals around us that were like Freeman, that were inundated with patients.
Did you lose any of your staff due to just people not wanting to be in the area because of the disaster? I mean, under stressful conditions. We
lost some, certainly. I think the total number that have left our payroll is more than 300 now, and that's just because some people, we're in our third interim hospital now since the storm, and we're in a permanent building now. It's an amazing construction, but we're still about 55% of our normal capacity. So some folks have left just because they want to work in a bigger hospital or work in a trauma center. We're not back to a trauma level yet. And so that's just kind of the natural stuff. People want to do that. Our permanent hospital doesn't open until 2015.
Okay, yeah, I see. And so that's why I was wondering, after a disaster and infrastructure's been destroyed, and it's got to take time to put things back the way they were or to make them better. And then I would think that, and I've been to some like earthquake areas and flood areas where people say, I'm not staying here, I'm out of here. Yeah. So that's got to be some of that fear that it might happen again.
Yeah, there's some of that. Some folks left to, some of the younger ones left to go back, be home with mom and dad, or tried another city. Maybe this one wasn't so good. One of our best cancer surgeons wasn't from this area, lost his home, lost his hospital, and decided to move to Tulsa, for example. So you have some of that just naturally. Now, I know some of those folks will come back when the new hospital's built in 2015, so it's just a little bit of an ebb and flow.
Sure. And Tulsa, of course, they have tornadoes there, too.
Oh, they do. They're right, just like we are. It's just kind of a corridor here that's right in the middle of it.
Yeah. So what about the critical incident stress aspect? What about the people that, your staff, because they lost homes and they experienced this traumatic event? How did you deal with that psychologically?
It's been a great story. In fact, it's such a blessing for us to have been part of Mercy because we had some resources that, there are a number of standalone hospitals that I'm sure they could have gotten those, but it wouldn't have been nearly as easy. But we very quickly kicked in an entire system to take care of our coworkers. First thing we did is that literally that next day is $500 went into the account of the people just because we do electronic payroll. So $500 went into every person's account that was even close to the disaster zone. And but then also we mobilized our human resources crew from literally within Mercy. So we got people down, and an entire section of that conference center that we took over was set up just to handle human resources and to help people find the things that they needed, to make sure they had the services, but then also to kick in with the counseling. So our employee assistance program, our EAP people were here in droves and literally met with people. Now, that was the first few months, but we've kept that up because, sometimes it takes years for some of that stuff to work its way out for people.
Oh, sure.
So we've kept that up, and we still have very active programs going on today to make sure people are taken care of well. Another great story along the coworker side is we had incredible donations flow in to take care of our coworkers. In fact, I think the total last I checked, Bob, was about 1.8 million.
Donations. These are donations.
Yeah, just from individuals, from companies, from foundations. They just said, we want to help those coworkers.
That's cool. Awesome.
It was amazing. And the volunteerism has been incredible. And maybe it's because of the Midwest, the part of the country we live in, I don't know. But even to this day, we have a ton of people who have devoted their lives really to helping us rebuild and to get back in shape.
And I know there are different groups, even from here in Iowa, that church groups and volunteer groups that have been going out to help people, rebuild whatever their need is.
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's one of the most heartwarming things of this kind of an event. Just the help that's been coming month and week after week.
Mm-hmm. Did you did you ever question yourself as far as how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to manage all of this situation? Did that thought ever pass through your head?
Oh my gosh, every day, every day. In fact, it was overwhelming. There were so many, those first few days, there were so many, I just call it inputs. There were so many people coming and saying, what are we going to do about this? Or these people have shown up and they want to do this. I mean, it was just overwhelming. So one of the great things we did, again, we kept our incident command going. And with the help of our people in St. Louis, we set up what we called 17 work streams, 17 different areas of focus. And so then we started to just divide and conquer, just like you would in good incident command. We started putting people in charge of each of those areas. We had 2 times a day where we'd call in and talk about, any critical decisions that needed to be made. So we made this elephant much more easily, we started taking a bite at a time instead of trying to figure out how to solve the whole elephant. And it was a wonderful way to organize. But the system works very well. We call it HIGHS, the Incident Command System. It works very well if you'll follow it. So we put people in charge of communications, in charge of logistics, in charge of supplies, and those people stepped up. And many of them had never done that before. But it was a great process and a great way to start working through some of those things that we've been studying and learning.
So
we know a little too well.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that you are sleeping a little better now.
Oh, much better. Yeah, it was the first couple of months was really tough, but now things are working very, very well, and we've learned some lessons, and we're making great progress toward our future.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most of Joplin would describe it that way. It's our school system has been a model. In fact, our school superintendent C.J. Huff is one of all of our heroes. Our community has done incredibly well. We've hired a master developer to kind of help us figure out how to best put this destruction zone back together, and so many of us in the community are involved in some of those committees and decisions. It's been very heartwarming to be part of it.
And like I said, it's been May of last year, and so it's still early in. Mm-hmm. So it seems like you've come a long way since that time, even though there's a long way to go.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly right. There is a lot to do. Still a great deal of work to be done, but great progress has been made. So yeah, it's just one of those things that I think we'll look back and it's been interesting. It's considerable destruction, but so many people are able to see the incredible blessings that have come from it. So it's been one of those great experiences in many ways.
Yeah, I used to say that people don't like it when you say good things come out of disasters and bad times. But sometimes I say positive things, and people like to hear the word, or when you say positive things is good, because many people say there's no good in this, or there's no good that could come out of this. But you see the best of people come out in disastrous times, and I think that's what you've been explaining here to us tonight.
No, you're exactly right, Bob. It's exactly that. In fact, tonight we're officed all over town. This new hospital that we're in right now, we built it to be purely clinical. So we kept some of us that aren't clinical in other areas. I'm in a bank building, and as this tornado warning came through tonight, we're all down in the vault with all the bank workers and thinking, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, you feel safe in the safe, don't you?
You do. In fact, there are 2 of our banks that were totally destroyed. The only things that are still standing are the vaults.
Yeah, that's true. They're built. Well, Gary, I appreciate your time, taking your time and driving through tornado warning to get home to be on the show. I really do appreciate that. We've been talking to Gary Pulsipher, who is the president, CEO of St. John's Regional Medical Center in Joplin, Missouri. And you've done a great job of describing the events of that tornado that took place last May. And so thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Bob, thanks for having me, and thanks for your good work. I think this is a great program and a great way to reach a number of people. Very good idea.
All right. Thank you, and take care.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
You've been watching CSI Iowa on Webcast One Live, and we will see you next time. Good night.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast